Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA on a Monday morning. It's Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a day in which we honor a man who looked at the character of all people in this country. It's also the day before the State of the Union address, which I think is maybe the most worthless speech that has ever been given. You know, Tom Jefferson had it right. Send the note up to the Congress and let them know, hey, things are about the same as they were. They're getting a little better, or, you know, give me a call later. I'll chat with you about it, or stop down and see me. But instead, we have the State of the Union address, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. We start with John the Bootlier this morning, but we have Rich Rubino, who's a blogger from Huffington Post and a political author of the political Bible of humorous quotations from American politics, which means he writes down what these people actually say, which is really easy because you just sit back and do that, right, Rich?
Absolutely.
I mean, you think about it. I said, when do they say something humorous? I said, when do they open their mouths? It's usually humorous for one of a number of reasons. Good morning, Rich. Great to have you back on the show.
Good morning. Glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
You know, we talk about words, and I know you're a guy that blogs. And I wanted to ask you a question this morning. For a lot of people out there that really maybe don't read bloggers as much, what's the difference between a blogger, a columnist, and a news reporter? And maybe I'll throw in a talk show host as well.
Well, a talk show host is usually verbal.
Or tries to be, usually on a Monday morning. It's a little harder than most.
A blogger is actually very similar to a columnist. I think that the only difference is I think a blogger just, doesn't necessarily do it as much as a columnist. A columnist would have a certain deadline, like maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday to write something, whereas a blogger, can just kind of write something. But, what I do is I do more or less columns for a blog. So,
right.
I consider myself somewhat more of a columnist, but of course it's on a blog. So
when you're a columnist, people often say to me, "Well, you're the op-ed page of the newspaper, or you're the op-ed page of the column." And I say, not necessarily. You have to be in this day and age where people can hit Google or Bing or whatever they want to hit and check me out. You have to be pretty careful about what it is you say and the figures that you use. Kind of react to that a little bit from a blogger's standpoint, that you can write what you want to write, you can write what you're feeling, and you write what you want to say, but there's a lot more to it than that, isn't there?
Well, yeah, you have to be accurate. Someone will call you if you someone will call you on it if you have some sort of a statistic that's incorrect, or if I remember one time I put a period after Harry S. Truman, and somebody called me and said that somebody wrote that that there shouldn't be a period after Harry S. Truman, and the people really pay attention to this, and I wrote back and I said that actually the Harry S. Truman Library says that there should be a period after the S in Harry Truman. So it's actually, I guess, a controversy in the Harry Truman community. And there are people that really pay attention to these things. So,
the same as people wanted to know what S stood for, and it doesn't really stand for anything, from what I understand, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess the S was his father's. His two grandfathers. They couldn't come up with a name, with an idea on what to name on a name for his middle name. So both of his grandfathers' names started with an S. They decided to put the S in there. But you're right, the S doesn't actually stand for anything. So it's just Harry S. Truman. It doesn't actually. It's not like Harry Samuel Truman or anything like that.
I imagine you're a little bit like me. You have to watch a lot of the talking heads over the weekend, all the various shows that are on, or at least pick up what they say. Was there anybody over the weekend that struck you as profound or maybe profane, if you'd like?
Not really. I'm trying to think who might have struck me as interesting.
Because I know you're looking out for the wordsmith kind of stuff all the time there with the quotes and comments they say.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I don't really do commentators as much. I know I was trying to think of watching Week the Press if anyone said anything that was really profound or anything. They had kind of a panel, and I know Lindsey Graham was on. And he talked about how he was considering running for president, and I was thinking, I don't think he's going to do too well, but I'm wondering what the factor is going to be in South Carolina when they come down there, because he's a native son, and I'm wondering, how much support he's going to get from, assuming he stays in the race that long. That was the only thing I was wondering about this weekend. But I didn't hear him or anybody else say anything profound or profane.
When I look at Lindsey Graham, when I look at John McCain, when I look at Chuck Schumer, I'm reminded of something I read one time. The most dangerous place in the world is 10 feet between them and a camera or a microphone. And you know, there are people that you get tired of seeing. Like I'm tired of seeing and hearing President Obama, but he's going to be around for another year and a half or so. So you know, is there some truth to that? I mean, these guys just feel like they have to comment on everything, and I get tired of it. And I don't care if they're right, left, Republican, Democrat. Yep. They annoy me.
Yeah, I think it was Bob Dole who said that about Chuck Schumer. He said the most dangerous place in Washington is between Chuck Schumer and a television camera.
Right.
No, I think you're right, and I think that it's interesting. McCain and Graham. It's funny, and I guess it used to be Joe Lieberman too. They'd always mention They'd always mention those three.
Right.
And it was always like they would always be together. They'd go on foreign trips together. It was just very odd because you couldn't mention one without mentioning the other two in many respects. And you're right. I mean, John McCain just does so much. It's almost like it just becomes ad nauseum. He just does so many appearances, and Lindsey Graham is certainly the same way. Chuck Schumer. I mean, I'm trying to think of others that used to go on all the time. There used to be Bob Barr was on all the time.
There you go, yeah.
Barney Frank used to go on all the time. And I do think that you can get to the point where you can really become annoying. I think there's sometimes about future presidential candidates. I think that sometimes you can almost wear out your welcome if you're doing too many appearances. If you're on everything, I think that you're not necessarily you don't become a fresh face. If you're running for 2016 and you're on every single appearance talking about the Farm Bill or something, I think it gets to the point where people see you and they say, "Oh, that guy again." If I were thinking of running in 2016 for president, I think I would do as little appearances as possible. When I did, I'd make sure that they were on some of the most prominent newscasts as possible. I'd make sure, I do like maybe one Sunday show, or I'd try to get myself on something like that. I wouldn't do necessarily CNN, every time they ask me, like, say, John McCain does. But I think you do get to the point where a lot of people, I know, are just say with John McCain, just like, enough already. He's on so many shows, and I think people really start to get kind of annoyed because it's interesting because he's usually on about foreign policy, and he usually says pretty much the same thing. You don't really get anything new out of him. You know exactly where it's going to come from. Usually kind of an interventionist inclination.
Well, and I don't know if I'm different or you're different from most other people, but when I get done looking at an event, I don't immediately then by association say, geez, I wonder what John McCain and Lindsey Graham are thinking about this. I don't ever think like that. Or anybody else, or Chuck Schumer. Geez, I could actually think about that a little bit on my own. And then, sometimes I might be interested in what somebody else's thoughts are. It might be something where I say, like the Cuba thing here, where we're trying to, work out things with Cuba. And I'm thinking, I'm kind of up in the air. I don't want to see us help the Castros, but we need to help the Cuban people. Would it really work? Is it time to put away the old feelings that we had for all these years? Because I'm a child of the 60s. So, I might want to hear what someone has to say on that, but I don't want to hear talking points. I get really annoyed by talking points. Do you?
Yes, absolutely. And you can usually tell that's something actually, and that's something kind of endearing, I guess, with Joe Biden, is that he's not on talking points when he talks, and he makes a lot of mistakes, and he offends a lot of people.
Exactly.
But when he talks, he's a real person, and when they ask him questions, he'll actually answer the question, as opposed to, the most interesting one is when they ask, are you running for president in 2016? And people like Elizabeth Warren will say, well, I'm not running for president.
Right.
Well, okay, you're not running for president this second. Then they have to make. So she's talking, and she's just one example. I'm not picking her specifically, but she'll talk in the present tense and say, "Well, no, I'm not running for president." And they say, "Well, will you run for president?" Do I have to put an exclamation point in that? I'm not running for president. Well, okay. Well, the question. Most people, the average person, if you ask that question, would assume what you're asking.
Like you're never going to run for president, or at least this term.
Are you going to run for president in 2016? Not are you running this second?
Right. I'm not running today, January 19th, but tomorrow's a new day.
Right. And then you keep trying to ask the question, and they want you to say unequivocally, even say, well, you know what, I'm really considering it. But when you keep saying it in the present tense, and people generally, when you're in a regular conversation, don't say it, don't answer questions in the present tense that are about the future.
Yeah, or like Hillary Clinton being coy about if she's going to announce sometime. Really? I'll be surprised if she announces. Oh my gosh, who could have thunk? When you look at the State of the Union address tomorrow night, I'm an old history teacher from years ago, and I thought then, and I think even more now, after having listened to a whole lot of State of the Union addresses because I have to, that Thomas Jefferson had it right. He was a pretty brilliant guy, but he had it right. Send the note up to him. it says in the Constitution from time to time you have to inform Congress about how things are going from your vantage point. So pretty good idea. Is there any chance we could ever get back to that? And please also, while we're doing it, the response afterward. Can we end that as well?
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think just because I think the presidents like the limelight, I don't think it would ever come back to that. It's interesting, actually. Washington and Adams actually did go up there and give a speech, and Jefferson thought it was becoming too monarchical.
Right.
So he said, no, I'm not going to give a speech. And then Madison, Monroe, the future presidents, decided not to do that. And actually, it was actually Woodrow Wilson who continued the practice.
Yeah, thanks, Woodrow. Appreciate that. Yeah.
And then every president beyond that said, I'm going to go up there. I remember the last presidential candidate, I actually remember who said that kind of criticized the whole formula was, I think, Ross Perot. Remember, he was I remember when he ran in 92 or 96, he'd make fun of the whole idea that the president stands behind there, and then the sergeant of arms yells, "Ladies and gentlemen, the president of the United States."
Right.
And then everyone has to watch the president go in, and then there's always someone like Sheila Jackson Lee from Texas is always there, right? She's every year. If you notice this, by the way, every year, Elliot Engel from New York's another one. They're always right on the. They get there, like 5-6 hours early, so they can stand on the line, and then they go, and then and then Obama is walking down, and then he has to shake hands with a Republican, and then go back with a Democrat, and those are two that are always going to be there.
Our congressman used to be on the aisle. Todd Platts was there every year when he was our congressman, but he said he was open about it. He said, "I like to do it. I feel like I'm part of history that day. I come in, I sit down, I do my work in there during the afternoon, get a good place on the aisle." He said, "I want to shake hands with the president no matter who he is," and so he was very open about it. He said, "I like doing that," and I think there's a little bit of a kid in some of those people. They're a part of a moment in history of these things. But I mean, I look at what's being said. I don't enjoy listening to it because you're going to see, except for the occasional thing where who was the guy from North Carolina some years ago screamed liar, and someone gets a little bit
Joe
of
Wilson,
Joe Wilson, and someone does something like that maybe is a little untoward, as you might say. So I like a little bit of chaos now and then, but there's not enough of it there to really get my interest.
There are two instances in history that I can think of that were actually somewhat unscripted, and then they were basically mistakes. The first was in '74 when Nixon was giving his, and he was talking about. He said that he said something, and he made a mistake, and he said the discredited presidency, and this was right in the kind of the fulcrum of Watergate.
Yeah.
That was one that was interesting. The other was Bill Clinton. Remember in '94. They put the wrong speech in the teleprompter, so he had to literally do it from memory, and which was really amazing that he could do that. And then I remember the next year in '95, the first thing he says is, "I don't know what speech they put in there tonight."
Right.
Those are the only two. I mean, I'm trying to imagine Obama if they put the wrong speech in the teleprompter, what he'd do. But those were the two in history that I think were really interesting. But most of it is a long litany of proposals that probably aren't going to pass. That they just say, let's put this in for energy. Let's put this in, and then they usually get stalled somewhere in committee. But it's usually a big bump for the president in terms of the State of the Union address, and then in terms of the responses, it's usually somebody who's kind of up and coming, who's actually, speaking of Bill Clinton, by the way, it's interesting. In 1985, they did for the response. What they did is they did kind of it was like almost like a video montage of the Democratic Party, and Bill Clinton was hosting this when he was governor of Arkansas. And he'd go out and he'd say, "We have these proposals," and he'd go out and then Tip O'Neill would talk, then Bob Byrd would talk. And I remember if you watch this, I think you can get it on YouTube. It's about 10 minutes long, and they actually have like credits at the end, believe it or not. And Bill Clinton in that speech, he said, "We need to build a bridge to the 21st century."
That was his theme later on.
That became his 1996 presidential campaign. That became his 1996 presidential campaign slogan. So as you look at it, you're like, wow, he was thinking about that way back in 1985.
Yeah, I just find it to be so tedious anymore because you know what's going to happen. I mean, you know what's coming. And I always like when, I think you and I might have talked about this last time. Again, we're talking with Rich Rubino, blogger from Huffington Post and political author of the Political Bible of Humorous Quotations. I remember they always say, our friends across the aisle, and you're sitting there seething already because you really don't like the guy. And then I always like too, but most of the time anymore, you don't see them really sitting together. They used to go sit together. One Republican would sit with a Democrat or vice versa. But now you don't do that because the Democrats all want to rise up or sit down or put their, hold their hands instead of clapping on a certain thing, or the Republicans do the same thing. So it really, you kind of look at that and say, geez, where's the comity of sitting together? And that would be kind of neat to see that, so you'd be sporadic around the audience there and deciding to protest or not. Hey, when we come back, one of the things that you are known for is your Bible of Humorous Quotations. And you gave me a few last time, and it was right at the end. I wonder if we could get a few more of those from you. Would that work out?
Oh, God, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. We'll be right back with Rich Rubino, blogger for the Huffington Post, and also political author of the Political Bible of Humorous Quotations for American Politics. Hey, we're going to have a lot of humorous quotations tomorrow night when the President does in State of the Union. Why not get an early start on it with Rich when we come back on the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on a Monday morning here. It's Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It's also a day we have Rich Rubino in, who's a blogger from the Huffington Post and political author of the Political Bible of Humorous Quotations from American Politics. And I always love the good spinning of a phrase, or a phrase that's ridiculous, a phrase that's funny, a phrase that is just off the wall. And apparently Rich does too, because he wrote this book. Hey, Rich, some of the phrases over the years that you kind of picked out, he said, this was kind of nuts. Okay, this was really off the wall. So give us a few of those this morning, just because I want that right now, and I am a person that needs something and wants it right at that same moment.
Well, let me give you the whole quote. I was talking about Nixon in '74. Remember, this is right when Watergate. This is all anyone was talking about was Watergate. And he goes up there and he gives a State of the Union. And one thing he said is, 1 year of Watergate is enough. But that's basically what all anyone was talking about was Watergate. And this is a kind of a Freudian slip. He said, I urge the Congress to join me in mounting a major new effort to replace the discredited president. He meant to say replace the discredited present system.
Right.
And that was, and then the next day
they apparently took that literally, though, went after it and took care of getting him out of there. But yeah.
That, of course, became the very next day the major story. Here's one that I think is kind of interesting. Calvin Coolidge, who it's kind of ironic that he said so many funny things, but he was known as the man who who said very little. He was known as the man of few words. And when he was vice president, he left being governor of Massachusetts, and governor named Chandling Cox who succeeded him as governor. And Coolidge came back to Massachusetts to visit him, and Cox says, it's funny, I'm here all day long. He says, I'm just listening to people all day. He says, I'm here till 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night sometimes. He said, back when you were governor, he said, you'd get out of here by 5 o'clock every day, if that. And he says, how do you do that? And Coolidge looks at him and says, you talk back. Which is really a great lesson. Just listen to somebody. Just if you just sit there, you listen, you nod your head, pretend you care, and then the person's right out the door, and then you get the next person to come in.
Good grief. By the way, I was sitting here thinking, as you said, there's Calvin Coolidge being replaced by Chandling Cox. CCCC, right?
Oh, that's right. Yes, that's interesting. That's what are the chances of an alliterative governor being followed by another alliterative governor?
There you go. I mean, it just hit me. I'm sorry.
No, that is. I never thought of that. I'm thinking, what are the chances of that? I've actually thought in the past about presidents with I guess alliterative names. I think like Woodrow Wilson or Ronald Reagan.
See, I may have given you inspiration for a brand new blog.
All about alliterative.
See, there you go. Now you start thinking about that stuff. It could be rough. And who doesn't remember Chandler Cox, right? I mean,
I know. He's really a legend. I know he's kind of an everyday. He's kind of a household word in most people's. Most people, I know, they wake up. That's the first thing they think of.
That's it. Who else out there kind of has hit you with some good lines?
Well, there was a guy. Here's kind of a funny one. Franklin Pierce. Another guy that I know everybody thinks about every day. Probably the most. By
the way, he was a president at one point in time, ladies and gentlemen. But go ahead.
Yes, that was part of his career. I thought most people would have known him because he was Speaker of the House in New Hampshire. But
sure. Yeah, who doesn't remember those moments? Huh? What a laugh.
His funniest moment. He in 1856. Here's a great trivia question. He was the last Democratic president who sought his party's nomination, went all the way to the convention, and lost. And he lost to James Buchanan. He became very unpopular, and he said, "There's nothing left to do but get drunk." And I think that might happen at the convention this time. If let's say Mitt Romney loses for the third time, I can imagine him saying that. But probably not Mitt Romney, but
if Lindsey Graham wins, and the Democrats will go get drunk, right?
Yeah.
There you go. But it's and of course James Buchanan, the only president from the state of Pennsylvania. He lived about 20 minutes from here, over in Lancaster. Yeah, he was. They still have his house Wheatland open there. You go through for tours and so forth, and not exactly a ball of fire, by the way. He was
the only bachelor president as well.
Yeah, the only bachelor president as well. So there you go.
I got a quote from him, actually. It's very interesting.
Go ahead. Final one.
Yep, Andrew Jackson, who really did not like him, by the way. He was explaining why he appointed Buchanan as Minister of Russia. This is before Buchanan became president. But Buchanan, I mean, you look at James Buchanan's resume; it's probably the best resume for any potential president. It is. It's not. I mean, he served just about every.
I know he's got a lot of stuff there on the sheet, but.
He said, anyways, this is what Andrew Jackson said. He said it was as far as I could send him to get him out of my sight, and where he could do the least harm. I would have sent him to the North Pole if we had kept a minister there.
Oh wow, and they always said that about the vice presidents too. Like I think it was McKinley that said, kind of wanted to send Teddy Roosevelt all over the place. We'll get into that next time, but Teddy Roosevelt eventually became president anyway because McKinley got shot. So
yeah, and the reason that he became vice president is when he was governor of New York, the boss Platt wanted him out of New York. He didn't want to be governor anymore. So how can we do the least harm? So they made a deal with McKinley. Said, well, can we just put him on your ticket as become vice president, then we can get a new governor in New York? So they said, all right, we'll do that. And a year later, McKinley's assassinated and Theodore Roosevelt's president. So that
brings us all the way back to Joe Biden again. We'll save that for the next time. Hey, great stuff this morning, Rich. Thanks so much. I look forward to our next meeting.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. Rich Rubino, blogger from Huffington Post and political author of the Political Bible of Humorous Quotations from American Politics. When we come back, Reverend Stephen Lewis Kraft. He's fired up all the time. He's a member of the Project 21 Black Leadership Network. Talks about Martin Luther King Jr. Day here on WSBA. It's 10 o'clock.